So good afternoon, guys. Thank you for a little patience there as I got that shared out. Yesterday we talked about being needed. We talked about the experience that comes, or where this comes from. The being needed component is all about the discard trauma. It's about how we were fundamentally neglected. We weren't seen. We weren't recognized. They didn't spend time with us. They didn't reflect back to us who we were or the value of our existence. Remember, I mentioned those two values that we all work with. The first value is the appreciation for existence. The second one is the appreciation for contribution or effort. And when our sense of value is tied up with that second value, the appreciation for contribution or effort, we lose contact with being valued for who we are. And so it configures us, it trains us, it programs our brain to be needed, right? Because our usefulness is where we get love. It's where we get identity, connection, and value. It's where we get a sense of belonging. We get a sense of power in our lives. And it takes the edge off the neglect we are dealing with. It minimizes it, doesn't heal it, but it medicates it. It's a way we cope with the lack of real love. Okay? So today I want to talk about, I want to build on what we talked about yesterday and how we start healing this. Because yesterday I gave you a little homework assignment, basically, and that is to start admitting that you need to be needed, right? So if you're willing to admit that and break down the denial you're facing, then we can get in there and we can start nurturing this. And there's a roadmap to doing this. So I can give you some actionable items today that can start making a difference in your life right now, because that's really what it's about, right? So as you can see here on the screen, I've got my little quick list here. I produce these like 2-3 times a week, put them on my Instagram, put them in the community. Sometimes I post them here on my private profile. But these are actually things I use all the time with clients and students, helping them rediscover themselves, get back in control of their happiness, and heal from that narcissistic abuse. The reason I am posting this one specifically is because it gives us what we need to do. It gives us the ingredients to moving from being needed to being loved. It's not, a lot of times people are like, these are great lists, Marshall, thanks. And they are, and I appreciate that. But they're also recipes. If you look at them in the point of view of a recipe, you start to see what you can be doing instead of what you're doing now, okay? So for instance, if we're going to move from being needed to being loved, we need to start appreciating our existence. Remember, that first and most primary element of value is the appreciation for our existence. Boom. So there's a lot of different ways we can do that, and the rate at which we begin to embrace our existence and appreciate it really depends on what we're doing with the shame that shows up about ourselves. Because guaranteed, if you've been through narcissistic abuse, you've dealt with codependency, you've been neglected, shame is lurking somewhere in the background, and if you haven't addressed it, you're going to be hitting some walls. So to move from shame to appreciation requires us to release it, integrate love in its place, and discover who we are in that. And that's what I call the heal process. And if you want to go really deep on that, that's what Codependency Confidence System that I have does for my clients. It's what we accomplish there. It's one of the 3 things we accomplish there, is reconnecting back to our value, back to our intrinsic self. So here's some ways you can start appreciating your existence right now. You can praise and appreciate it. I like doing this with a question rather than a statement. It would be something like this: if I could, would I praise and appreciate the fact that I exist? Would I give myself permission to appreciate who I am? If I could, would I allow myself to feel appreciation for the person I be? If I could do that, why wouldn't I do that? These kind of things, these kinds of questions allow us to open up to the idea of appreciation, open up to the experience of it so that we can connect to it. This is part of how we start to recondition or reprogram our emotional association to ourselves. And I guarantee, if you're dealing with this, you have an emotional association of fear, guilt, shame, fatigue, emptiness, loneliness to you. You wonder if you have the right to exist. You wonder if you're a burden, right? You wonder if you're a problem. If you're just selfish and you don't really know it, if there's something wrong with you. Maybe the narcissist was right. Maybe the abuser was right. Maybe there really is something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not lovable. We've got to heal that. We've got to release that shame, and that is one of the ways we can do that cognitively. You can do right now. You can start practicing that and opening up to it. So when we start to appreciate our existence, we can start to value our presence and our self-expression. This is interesting because when we start valuing it, we see it as worthwhile, as interesting, as beneficial, as good. Then our sense of confidence, our sense of well-being, our sense of belonging raised. It goes up, it jumps. And it's really important with the self-expression component, because if we're trying to control ourselves or be a certain expression to get other people to do something or to be something or respond to us a particular way, we're struggling with our value. Like right now, I'm a little nervous, I'm a little clunky, but hey, that's my self-expression right now. That's where I'm at. And so when we start to really value ourselves, we start to appreciate who we are. We appreciate us, our quirks, our curiosities, our humor, our limitations, our bad days, our good days. We start to give all of that love, then our self-expression becomes a lot easier to just be. Because then we can be nervous. We can occupy the space of insecurity. We can occupy the space of confidence. We can show up. We can hide. We can do what's there, but at least we're going to have an honest contact with it, rather than trying to be what we think somebody else wants us to be so that they'll need us, right? And when we start to really value and appreciate ourselves, our boundaries become recognized to ourselves. And then we can help other people recognize those boundaries. And that's where we start building healthy, functional relationships. And this is where we start to experience being valued by other people. Because being valued is an emotional experience. Guys, relationships are emotional. People, whether it's business or work or personal or friendship or play, we're making decisions mostly based on how we feel, not based on necessarily what makes sense. A really good example we all do with this is with food. We know that food, certain types of food, will lead to certain kinds of outcomes. We like food that tastes good, so we eat that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy, right? And so we do that because of how we feel. Well, when we recondition how we feel about us, when we see ourselves and feel more value, that's the big, I'll give you a big pro tip here, guys. In healing this, it's not here. You can't think yourself into healing. Healing is a transitional, it's a state of change within the body. It's going from feeling one way to feeling a different way and making that a habit. So, for instance, if you have a shame relationship with yourself, you can use that shame to trigger love if you create it with the right process. And that's actually what I teach in Codependency Confidence. So we begin to when we start to feel different about ourselves, we start to act different because we're seeing ourselves differently. So it's really important that in whatever healing you do, you must feel it. Because if you're not feeling it, it's not working. So if your therapy is all about understanding, but it's not about feeling differently and embodying it and experiencing who you are from that, then you need to look at adjusting that so you can get the healing you deserve, because healing happens in the body. It's not going to be up here in your thoughts. All right. So as we begin to appreciate ourselves, value ourselves, we recognize our boundaries, then our attentiveness jumps to our emotional needs, our well-being, our freedom, our individuality. We start enjoying and investing time with ourselves and with others. We we really see that our feelings matter. When our feelings matter to us, we're going to stand up for ourselves. When our emotions and how we feel and perceive things matters, we value it, it has meaning to us, it's worthy, then we're going to stand up for ourselves. We're going to advocate for ourselves. You want to love yourself? That's the secret. It's really about valuing what you feel, what you think, and what you experience. It's to elevate yourself to an equal platform with others, right? You deserve to love yourself, but you got to value it. You got to see it as worthy. And some of that's a mental mindset component, and some of it's your emotional programming. We've got to work with both to work that out. So when you start to approve of, praise, or appreciate your emotions, you're going to start to touch more into your innate value, which is going to raise your confidence. And it's going to lead you from being needed to being loved, because you're going to start experiencing an emotional change with the idea of being needed. And it's really going to come through the emotional experience of it. Because I remember when I stopped trying to be needed and started to work on being loved, being needed felt heavy. It felt contractive. It felt disruptive. It wasn't happy. I didn't enjoy it. It was painful and it was draining. But being loved was more playful. It was more expansive. It was light. It was safer. And it produced better long-term results because I didn't have to chase the love. I was creating reciprocal love. Whereas being needed, I'm always having to find something to be needed in, right? This is how we move from being needed to being loved. It's the process of praise and appreciation, the release of shame, fear, guilt, or fatigue about ourselves. It's about reconditioning how we think and how we see ourselves and beginning to believe that and trust that, rather than just kind of like, maybe I'm that way. No, it's building in that belief and level of trust we have in that, the same or even stronger level of belief and trust that we had in the negative. We start doubting and getting skeptical about the negative in the same way you may be currently doubting and being skeptical about the positive element, right? So when you start doubting the shame, you start doubting the negative self-chatter, the criticism you might put on yourself or that you might absorb from others, and you start trusting the positive feedback you give yourself, the positive point of view, the loving point of view, the kind point of view. This is where you're going to start to see that you don't need to be needed, that you do need to be loved, and you deserve real love. When we give up being needed, the whole world gains a lot of space for us, because then we can start expressing and sharing ourselves in ways that really connect back to others and back to life and deeper with ourselves. This is where happiness starts to show up. This is where our confidence shows up. This is where purpose is found. Guys, being loved is the gateway back to yourself, and it's back to your happiness. It's back to purpose. It's back to what you want to contribute to the world. Okay? So those are some tips on moving from being needed to being loved. Okay? So it gives you an action item you guys can take right now. Start with praise and appreciation of your feelings, of your desires, of your limitations, even of your mistakes, your doubts, your failures, your limits. Give it all love and start to see what changes for you. And then look at your need to be needed as a hint or a reminder to return back to love for yourself. Okay? When you start to feel love for yourself, at least give yourself the opportunity to feel that love in response to the need to be needed, you'll find your body calms down. You'll find your mind begins to relax, and you begin to rest. And that's generally what I find in that. So use your need to be needed to remind you to love yourself and to nurture that love. So that's all I have today, guys. Pretty quick little video on this, little training. Get to work. That's the recipe right there. You can find this on my Instagram page or on my Facebook page at Free to Self, or you can look it up as Healing Codependency and Trauma with Marshall Burtcher. So appreciate you guys. Thank you for showing up. Tomorrow we'll have an additional training on this. We'll be getting a little deeper on the nature of being loved, being needed, what purpose looks like, things like that. And we'll go from there. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.